Marketing is about values.
Nike didn't call me and sell me this in a catalog. I bought this swoosh because it's ingrained in my soul.
When you have a product that really resonates with customers, the word of mouth grows like wildfire.
Welcome to the Marketing Max Show. Now, let's dive in.
All right. Welcome, everybody, back to the Marketing Max Show. You got Logan and Max here. We're going to have a few segments today. We're going to dive in with our CMO of segment. We teased this in episode 1 of this new season, but essentially, we're going to tee up Max with a question of, if you were the CMO of a certain company or a company in a certain industry, what would you be doing right now? And if you're listening to this and you haven't had your head under a rock, you've probably heard about the TikTok ban, not ban. We'll even see by the time this releases, maybe things have changed even since then. But my question to you, Max, is if you were the CMO of a company that had heavily invested in TikTok as a channel, you're seeing a lot of engagement and traffic through that channel right now, what would you be thinking about doing?
Well, the obvious first thing that comes to mind is getting familiar with and starting to shift time, energy, and money, all of your resources over to other platforms. The obvious one being Instagram Reels, YouTube Shorts, even Twitter just launched a new full mobile view feed for videos. They're going to be putting that at the bottom of their app, like as Reels. Like you could tap a button for Reels now, it has it at the bottom. So yeah, the first obvious thing is, you want to focus on other platforms. A few other things that I think people may or may not be thinking of is, number one, I would make a list of every influencer your brand has ever worked with, even if it was like 3 years ago, 3 months ago, and maybe if you had a falling out or anything. And I'd reach out to them and I would ask if they had or just ask, what their strategy is, what their plan is. If they were on TikTok in any way, shape, or form, are they going to focus more on some app you've never heard of that they know about because they're in the creator space and they just might know about things before you do as an entrepreneur or founder of a company? Are they going to be repurposing their content, pixel for pixel and just downloading it all off TikTok and re-uploading it to Instagram? And then I would also ask them, like, in their own mind, in their own words, what is the difference between creating content on Instagram Reels versus YouTube Shorts versus TikTok? Like, they post way more content than most brands do. Some brands have like an in-house team that does it, but like they're really familiar with it. So kind of getting education from the influencers that you've worked with, specifically of what's working in your niche or with other clients that they might be working with through this transition, is that's the first thing I think that people may or may not be thinking about. The other thing is, if you haven't already, you can just Google like TikTok free downloader without the watermark. Have a virtual assistant download all of the videos you've ever had and actually have the virtual assistant screenshot. Or if you want to go full send, you can have the virtual assistant create a Google sheet with all of your videos, the title of the videos, the comments, like the actual comments, how many likes it got, how many views it got. That way you always have that data if it does get banned again. I don't think it'll get banned. I really don't think it will for a very, very, very long time. Especially with all this like free speech stuff that everyone's promoting and obsessing about over now. Politics aside, but all for free speech. Yes, of course. But I don't think it's going to get banned. But yeah, those are the two things I think maybe people may or may not be thinking about. Anything that comes to your mind, Logan?
Yeah, I like what you said about reaching out to influencers, whether you've worked with them on TikTok or on other platforms, because they're really plugged into this. As much as in-house marketers and agencies are thinking about this, the creators, especially those with big followings, they've probably been thinking about it more. So pick their brains, right? And especially, I like what you said, start with those that you have a relationship with, even if it's been rocky, and see what they're talking about. And I like what you said also about not just what are your plans, what other channels? Because I think everybody would say, Instagram Reels and YouTube Shorts, even LinkedIn now. Most often when you see a vertical video, you click into it, you go into the video feed. For most people now, LinkedIn likes to slow roll these feature updates, and it looks different for all of us and that sort of stuff. But I'm starting to see that now. But where are they, ripping and replacing and taking the content exactly from one platform to the other? And where are they contextualizing it? And if so, how? that should inform, your content creation strategy. Again, drawing on the creators, because I'm a big fan of where marketers in-house and agency side can think more like creators. They're going to win, I think, in 2025 and beyond. So tap into the creators that you do know.
I think everyone throws around the word creators so loosely. It's like, oh yeah, the creators. In reality, I think founders, I was on the phone this morning with an e-commerce brand that's a client of mine. And she said, I've tried 1 million of these like UGC content creator platforms, and they're all mediocre. And then I kind of pressed her a little bit and I said, okay, well, did you give them a brief? Well, we gave them some talking points. Okay, well, how detailed was the talking points? How detailed was the brief? Did you give them hooks? And they were like, and she said, these creators should be good enough or clever enough to figure it out on their own. And I said, well, how much did you pay them? How big of a creator are they? What other experience do they have in your specific vertical, in your specific niche? And, it's the thing that the entrepreneurs don't want to hear. It's like, I hire someone, they should be able to do everything soup to nuts. But in reality, when you hire people, whether it's a content creator, whether it's a Facebook ad buyer for your agency, whether it's a CMO for your company, whatever it is, you need to give them guidelines and bumpers, as I like to call it, like when you're bowling, bumpers, to make sure that they not only stay within the lane, but also have a really good chance of hitting your end target. And you're the entrepreneur, you're the founder, or if you're a CMO and you're hiring someone underneath you, you're hiring a creator and you're on the marketing team. Like if they don't have nearly as much context into what works and what doesn't work from a messaging standpoint, they can put it together with clever, captions and on-screen transitions and music and everything else. But in terms of the messaging and sharing other things that you see are working in your niche, like if you sell t-shirts and that creator has a ton of experience selling, lingerie, then, it's not going to be an easy transition for them. So anything you can do to make it easier on the creator side is really, 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 really valuable. Yeah. And I think it falls under the 80-20 principle. Like, 80% of the success of UGC will probably come from you putting in like 20% more work. And I know that's not exactly how the Pareto principle works. 20% more work. It's 80% of the come from 20%. But you get my point. Like if you do a little extra to make it easier for the creators to create content, how many times can I say create or creators in an episode? I don't know. But you can make it a little bit easier for them to bring them up to speed on your industry, on your product, on your messaging, on what's working best, and what's not working best, then you're going to be in a much, much, much better position. So use them as resources. Logan said it very well. Like use them as resources beyond just where should we go. Use them to kind of direct you or your internal team about what's working and what's not working. And especially if an influencer has more followers on a different platform and you just happen to work with them on TikTok, like they're going to know the music that performs best on Instagram. They're the length, the time of the video that performs best on LinkedIn and their video viewer feed and everything else. So like pay more attention to this stuff.
Yeah. I mean, two things come to mind there too. In like, are you working with a creator because they have a big audience, or are you working with a creator that deeply understands your niche? Because if it is the latter, then maybe you don't have to put in that extra 20%, but you need to realize, what sort of creator am I working with and what talent is this platform if you're using a UGC creator, platform or something like that. Yeah. And then the second thing I thought of, like to keep going with the bowling analogy of the bumpers you were talking about, like if you're paying someone who's never bowled before, but they can get a ball down the lane, you need some big bumpers to make sure they hit some pins, right? And then you're going to set the ceiling so far. Now, if you hire an expert bowler, it's going to be like, just go do it, man. And like bowl as close to a 300 as you can, but you're paying that person differently. Right. And so I think that, to the client you were talking to, like the next question would be like, well, if you want to give less direction and you want more of an expert creator, like either put in some more work on the brief or spend a little bit more or find a creator who knows your space a little more deeply. Yep. And then you can just kind of point them in the right direction and go, and maybe you don't need as big of bumpers. So just keep pulling on that thread of the analogy. The next segment I want to get to is our trends section. So we did this in episode 1 of this season, talking about your recap of 2024 trends proven wrong. That was a great one. If you haven't caught that and you're new to the show, make sure you listen to Max's. I think we broke down 5 in that episode. Today, you mentioned X and launching a video feed. What are your thoughts on this trend? Is it going to flop? Are you, diving in there? Obviously, you've got a big following on X. What are your thoughts on this trend? Boom or bust, I guess.
When I first saw it, I was really excited. I immediately messaged it to my clip guy because, as you all could have guessed by now, and especially if you read my newsletter, my goal for this year is to push out one podcast episode a week with Logan. Logan's my accountability partner, except for the week or two when my first child gets born sometime in March. My goal is to publish one a week. Maybe we'll bulk up on a few, so I hit my goal.
Yeah.
But my goal is to do that every week. And then now I have a clips guy that's cutting up all of these videos, all of these podcast episodes into videos to post on Instagram, to post on TikTok, if it's alive, whenever goes out, and now on Twitter. So when I first saw it, I immediately sent it to my clips guy, and I was like, "This is amazing," because I already have 50,000 followers. Although I will say, I think it's going to be bust, and I think it's going to be bust because people who spend a lot of time on Twitter typically don't spend as much time on any other platform, and the reason for that is because Twitter is the largest, not B2B, even though it is B2B, but Twitter is the largest not B2B text-based social network. Yes, there are photos. Yes, there are videos. Yes, there are memes. Yes, there's a lot of stuff, but it really is text-based.
Mm-hmm.
And I just don't see a world where the community that we live in on Twitter, which is the business community, really adopts the vertical, the vertical video format similar to a TikTok. I just don't see that happening. I see it happening more and more and more on LinkedIn. It's going to take probably a year or two before it's even remotely frequent on LinkedIn, if you will.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think it's bust for Twitter, not in the sense that they shouldn't have done it or it won't work, but it won't be what Reels is on Instagram or what the video viewer feed is on LinkedIn at all, because people are there because they like reading. They like seeing the text, and that's how they consume. They read more books. I saw some study a few years ago that was like people who spend the most amount of their time on any social platform on Twitter read more books than people on any other social platform. And it makes sense, right? Because they enjoy reading content. They enjoy consuming content with written word, not visuals. So again, you might be rolling your eyes like, Max, all I do is see memes on there. And like, okay, that's great. But it's still a text first place.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a sanctuary for a lot of people who enjoy reading more than just watching videos.
Yeah, that's interesting because I didn't know about that study. It makes sense to me, but you think about like the evolution of Reels on Instagram. It was already a very visual platform. Like Instagram was, photo first way back in the day, and still is very image driven, right? LinkedIn's been kind of a mixture. It's interesting to see LinkedIn's evolution. Like when I first got started on LinkedIn about 2018, and I was with an agency, we were doing podcast production, but also helping them turn that into content specifically for LinkedIn, because all of our clients were B2B SaaS for the most part.
Yeah.
And I would tell them, don't attach an image. Don't worry about video. Like text is really, where it's at. And attaching an image would just crater your organic reach on LinkedIn. Now it's the opposite because they're trying to follow suit with Instagram. So like LinkedIn's still weird, but Instagram, that makes sense. Obviously YouTube with shorts, that was a natural evolution. It is the video platform, arguably. And so I think that makes sense with X as well.
One interesting thing on the LinkedIn side is people have been asking LinkedIn to create more video features, tools, whatever you want to call it, for a long time. And they didn't really
on the creator side, meaning like with trending sound and like things like that other platforms have, remixing.
Yeah.
And okay.
Yeah, exactly. And just like prioritize it more in the feed.
Right. Right.
And what I think a lot of people don't realize is how LinkedIn makes their money. LinkedIn makes almost all of their money from their recruiting software tool and their sales navigation tool, but most of it is the recruiting tool. So they could give two shits, excuse my French. They could give two craps about, how much time people are actually watching video versus text versus anything else. Because at the end of the day, what they care about most, the thing that keeps the lights on for them, and obviously LinkedIn is now owned by Microsoft, is people being on the platform in order to share their resume, what I call their resume, like they call it the experience on their profile, and then sharing whether they're open for work or not, and how often they respond to DMs from recruiters and sometimes salespeople, but mostly recruiters. So I just think like they're never going to fully prioritize video with the amount of tools and features that TikTok or Instagram will, because as you said, right, like LinkedIn, the evolution has come a long way, but they still have a really long way to go.
Yeah.
And so I just think like putting all of your eggs in that basket, if you're not a B2B company, like not 100% B2B, where like your audience would never be on Twitter, your audience would never be on Instagram, I think it's a little risky given that they're always going to be prioritizing recruiting and the sales navigation features.
Yeah, I think you're spot on there. I've been seeing more ads for LinkedIn lately, and it's still all about finding the right job, that sort of stuff. Like there's one I saw the other day, this guy like squeezing into this weird office, and it's like find a job that fits. They are not advertising their platform as content consumption or content creation. It's come a long way, and a lot of people have, been able to see success there. I have 20,000 followers on LinkedIn right now, and barely any on any other platform though. So to your point about all your eggs in one basket, I've been thinking about like, how do I diversify from here and what channels make sense? But also, this is why job update posts like blow up all the time. If you do starting a new position post, I've even done this to where I'm like, I've consulted with some folks where I'm like, use this in kind of a hacky way. Like you launch a new podcast, add the podcast, create a company page for the podcast, and start a new position as podcast host of XYZ show, and then add it to your experience. And when it inevitably says, hey, Max, do you want to share this with your network? Say yes, write a good post about it, and put a link to subscribe to the show or whatever in the first comment. And, take their love of the recruiting and hiring part of LinkedIn and like push your content creation into that funnel and let it work for you. So yeah, you're spot on there, man.
Yeah, I honestly never thought about that, but that makes all the sense in the world. That's why all those posts go viral. And that's why all the memes making fun of LinkedIn is like, oh, Susie started a new job as senior account executive at the same company she's working at for 15 years instead of account executive. Ooh la la, go Susie. And that makes so much sense because their whole business is the recruiting business. Like it has to be at least 60% of their revenue. Minimum 60% of their revenue is the recruiting and sales nav piece.
And sales nav, because they have the biggest database of people based on not so much their personal interests, but their job title, the company, the size, their seniority, those sorts of things. So
yeah, it's a brilliant arbitrage play, right? It's like if we create a feed and a wall, if we create like the public resume database for people, like I view it as a resume. It calls it experience, but it's basically everyone's resume. Like I don't even look at resume. When I see jobs, I just go to their LinkedIn. I don't even look at resumes. It's the modern resume. And so when I guess they were just getting started, I listened to a few podcasts from the founder, and he said, we basically realized like if we can get everyone to give us their resume or essentially their experience, then we can go sell that data to recruiters. And that was how they got their first kind of scratch at product market fit, but it took them years to nail. It's crazy, interesting arbitrage business. Every business is an arbitrage business, literally.
Facebook is basically the same way, but they just started on the personal side of like build your personal profile of who you are, how old you are, gender, what you like, what you don't like, those sorts of things. And now we can leverage that because we know all of this about you, and it's just from a different angle, personal life versus professional life, right?
Yeah, it's really crazy that Meta hasn't tried to create a competitor to LinkedIn because they always copy all the consumer apps, and they make tons of money from B2B advertisers for sure.
Right?
Why haven't they tried to create a LinkedIn competitor? That's a whole other episode. I know we're almost at time for this, but like, how come LinkedIn is the only way that professionals communicate and the only semi-large and above, obviously it's the largest, but like, how is it the only, I should say critical mass business social network, but there's like 15 others for personal? Facebook, Snapchat, TikTok, Twitter, Instagram.
I've never thought about it that way. There's literally no competitor in professional social network to LinkedIn.
That is correct. I mean, Glassdoor is kind of in some ways similar because they're a huge, they also sell to recruiters in terms of like a business, like who's the customer buying the product.
Yeah.
But LinkedIn, they don't have any competitors in terms of attention. Like where are people going to get business content from other people, right? Like Facebook we are the product. Like you and me are the product. We sell each other, right? So like that attracts us. But then on the other side, it's the advertisers. The same with LinkedIn. Like that just doesn't exist. It's really wild. I've seen a few companies try to create a new LinkedIn and they fail every single time. That's a whole other discussion about why. Yeah, it's really wild. That's also why LinkedIn ads are insanely expensive, right? Because they're the only player in the game. If you want to reach, 100% accurate, 100% accuracy.
The only problem with LinkedIn targeting is everybody's a founder. And, if I say, hey, I want founder, it will not, delineate of Logan is founder of Logan Lyles Consulting, but director of growth of Business Builders. And it will say, oh, look, he's a founder. And then the company over here is 20 employees. Okay, that meets the threshold. So when you're targeting founders, you get a lot of people who are like, wait, they're not a founder of anything. They just have this side gig, but they're, junior marketing assistant at this 500-person company. And you think you're reaching a founder of a 500-person. Anyway, speaking of follow-up questions and more conversation, next week, I think we're going to have some extended time on the mailbag. We've got some questions that have been sitting there. So if you've submitted your question, make sure you tune in next week. We're going to dive into some of those. And as always, if you want to submit a question, go to growthdaily.com, get the newsletter. You should be getting that anyway, and reply to that so that you can send in your questions for Max and I to talk about here on the show. And if we're not connected, speaking of LinkedIn, look me up on LinkedIn, Logan Lyles, LoganLyles, very easy to find there. Other than that, we'll see you next week. All right, Max, that's it, man.
Thanks as always.
Thanks for listening to the Marketing Max show. It takes me and my team hours to produce it every single week, but it only takes you 15 seconds to hit that share button and text it to a friend, drop it in a Slack group, or share it on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram, or any of your favorite social platforms. I appreciate you taking the time to check out my content. Have an awesome day.